Are you interested in being a better husband, a better father, and a better man at work? You are in the right place. Welcome to Rock Solid Men, where we're becoming better men led by the God who created us. I'm Chad Starfelt, and I'm your host. Join me for a weekly dose of truth as we seek to become better men of God. Welcome back to another episode of Rock Solid Men. Today we are talking about how to deal with anger. Yeah, this isn't something any of us men need to deal with, right? No, none of you ever get mad or blow steam. None of you slam on the horn in the traffic or get mad at your young kids. None of you lose your temper at your spouse or at your grandkids or something like that at work. Yeah, it's something all of us deal with, right? And there's healthy ways and there are unhealthy ways to deal with anger. Anger is an issue. Anger is something lots of men struggle with. I can't tell you the number of wives who've come to me and said, "Would you please talk to my husband? He has so many anger issues. There are so many things he needs to learn how to deal with his anger." I can remember one of the stories my daughter likes to share the most is when I got my oldest daughter, when I got mad at her about cleaning her room, and I went in to inspect it after she supposedly cleaned it, which I always did, and her Game Boy, her little Game Boy, this was back a while ago, 20 years ago, or 18 years ago, 16 years ago, and it was still laying on the floor. And supposedly, according to her, I threw it at her and hit her arm or her side. I just remember throwing it and it landing on the bed. But anyway, I used to struggle with anger a lot, and I've learned a lot. One, through a counselor, Dr. William Backus, and his book, Telling Yourself the Truth. To be honest, I also improved a lot in handling anger when I realized I was struggling with depression massively, and I got on some antidepressant medication. But anger is something that often is handed down. We learn from our mom or dad regarding anger, and I'll never forget when I was a youth minister, one of my youth went and just punched this other kid in the face, and I went and I talked to him, and I was angry at his anger. I was frustrated, but as we talked, he just said, "This is how my dad deals with any time he's frustrated. I was just doing what my dad does." And so he had learned how to deal with frustration by getting physical. And so anger is often passed down. One of the most important things to learn about anger, and that I learned from Dr. William Backus, the psychologist and pastor as well, from his book, Telling Yourself the Truth, and through some counseling with him. People don't make you angry, you make you angry. Let me say that again, because this is hard for most of us to wrap our brain around. People don't make you angry, you make you angry. Now, how does this play out? We say all the time, "You make me so angry," or lots of people say, "You make me so angry." In reality, we decide to become angry in the situation. That's our response. For example, if your wife leaves the garage door open yet another night, she came home late from a meeting or a girls' night out or getting the groceries or whatever, and she didn't hit the garage door to close, and you find in the morning that it's open. Now, two different men, two different husbands can respond to that completely different. She did not make you angry. If you become angry in that situation, you have chosen to become angry. Because one man could just
close the door and go, oh, my wife, she's so silly. She left the door open again. I love her for her little quirks. And the other man can get livid, can get upset, can go in screaming and yelling at his wife for yet another time of forgetting to close the garage door. See, two people can respond completely different. And that's true even with your spouse and you, with a situation with your children. Say you have young kids and one of them refuses to eat their peas or their sauerkraut or whatever crazy thing you put on their plate. And I can tell you, we battled those meal issues, food issues as well when the kids were little. And you can get very frustrated. You can feel out of control. You can feel angry that your child is not obeying you. And your wife can be frustrated too as well. But she might be frustrated over her daughter not turning out the way she wanted it to be. Or maybe that the relationship isn't there. She feels like it's more of a relationship issue, and you feel like it's more of a control issue. We respond differently, but ultimately our anger is our response that we need to take responsibility for, and it is a choice we make. It is not something outside of us. It is an emotion that we can have control of. And if we don't manage our anger, it will manage us. It will hurt us. It will destroy us. It will cause ends of marriages, ends of jobs, ends of relationships with kids or other friendships. Anger is usually referred to, though, as a secondary emotion. In other words, feelings of anger usually are masked with some other underlying emotion, especially fear. Fear comes first, and then the emotion of anger in response. Some researchers indicate that acting out through anger and irritability may be how some men actually cope with depression, especially when connected with emotions to stress or to shame. This may be challenging for those who love that person to figure out that their anger is actually depression. And fear can certainly drive depression. Fear of failure, fear of a lost relationship, fear of a loss of job, fear of a loss of a marriage. And that can drive a person to depression. When I struggled with depression, I massively struggled with depression. Looking back, I can remember times that I wanted to drive off the edge of the highway into the river or into the cement wall on the highway. I can remember falling asleep with my kids, tucking them into bed at 8 o'clock at night because I was just completely gone. And the truth is, my wife had to deal with a lot of anger when I was frustrated because ultimately I felt out of control of my circumstances, out of control of myself, out of control of people's reaction to me. And that led to anger. So fear is always the underlying emotion to anger. Fear of loss of a job, fear of relationship, fear of a loss of control. So it's really boiled down into three main areas, actually, that this fear manifests itself. The fear and therefore anger is a response to the threats of security, of connection, and of control. When we feel a lack of security, we can get angry. If we feel like our job is on the line, we can react in anger. Security financially or emotionally or physically. There's a lot of response right now with COVID-19 because of a lack of security, a lack of knowing the future, a lack of knowing if your job is going to be there or not. So it's a lack of security. So we often respond in anger because of that fear that came from a lack of security. Also, a lack of connection. Maybe if regarding our relationships with others, maybe you feel rejected, you feel devalued, you feel like there's a disconnect between your kids and you, or your wife and you, or your boss and you, and so you get frustrated. This actually happened to my wife and I a few months ago. I felt a loss of connection, a loss of respect, a loss of relationship there because Sean was basically accusing me of not caring about our morning devotion time because I had kind of missed it a few days in a row because of sleeping in or choosing to jog instead or whatever. And I got quite angry, and it escalated quite quickly. And the reason was because I felt I was being criticized or cut down. But still, it is not her fault that I reacted that way. It's how I felt. It's the lack of connection, but it was my choice to react in anger instead of calmly telling Sean how I felt when she accused me of this or that. The last is control. So fear comes out of a lack of security, a lack of connection, and the third, the lack of control. We want to be empowered. We want to feel in control. We want to know that things are going our way. And there was a time where I felt very out of control of a work situation. I got very angry and almost lost my job. Maybe you have been there. Maybe you can identify. But anger can really cause some problems. And when we're afraid, we're not going to get that security. When we're afraid, we're not going to get that connection. When we're afraid, we're not going to get that control. Then we respond in anger. In a relationship, when we do get that anger, when we want that anger to dissipate, if we want that anger to be gone and completely taken out of our lives, the best thing for us to do is to turn to Jesus. The most powerful thing for us to do is to turn to the almighty, all-powerful, all-loving, all-caring God of the universe, Jesus Christ, because he is our security, he is our connection, and he is ultimately in control. And when we surrender to him, when we let go of the control, when we let go of the frustration, when we let go of feeling like we have to have all security under our own belt, then that relationship grows and we find something amazing with our relationship with God. Something to be aware of as well is that sometimes people call anger frustration instead of anger, right? If you grew up being told that anger was always bad, then sometimes we can just call it frustration, but in reality, it's still anger. So here's some truths about anger. I want to just share with you a few detailed truths. First, one is anger is not a sin. Anger is not a sin. Ephesians 4:26 says, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry." So if Paul is saying to us in Ephesians, in your anger, do not sin, that means we can be angry without sinning. Certainly, Jesus was angry at times. He was angry, especially with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He was angry with the people exchanging money at the temple steps, who were basically getting rich off of selling sacrifices for those that needed them in the temple. They had shown up without a sacrifice, and so they were elevating the prices of the doves or the lambs or the sheep in order for those Jews to find their sacrifice. So That is key. That anger itself is not a sin, but it certainly can quickly lead to a sin. Another truth about anger is anger hurts relationships. It doesn't matter if it's with your neighbor, with your boss, with your dog, with your cat, with your friend, with your kids, with your parents. Anger hurts relationships. Proverbs 30, verse 33 says this, "For as churning cream produces a butter, and as twisting the nose produces blood," I love that visual, twisting the nose produces blood, "so stirring up anger produces strife." Strife with your spouse, strife with your boss, strife with your kids. Anger really is rarely helpful. Sometimes we have a righteous anger. Sometimes it is okay to get angry about certain things that are unjust, that God wants us to do something about. But that's usually regarding a situation, a teaching, or a way the government responds or something like that. It's not targeted directly towards people or a certain person in our life. Anger hurts relationships. Number 3, there's two kinds of anger. There's reactionary anger and there's deep-seated anger. The deep-seated anger comes from disappointments with childhood, disappointments with yourself and how life has turned out. Reactionary anger is a little bit easier to deal with, getting angry with the traffic or getting angry when your pencil breaks or whatever. But the deep-seated anger is much deeper, much more difficult to figure out, and often, as I said before, manifests itself as depression or a fear or anxiety. The deep-seated anger can come out in the midlife crisis when you're frustrated that life hasn't turned out the way you thought it would. You haven't won your $1 million yet. You haven't wrote the book yet. You didn't star in the movie yet. You don't own a company yet. That's when that deep-seated anger can come out and really get ugly. Number 4, all anger has fear behind it. And we've talked about that a little bit already, but all anger has fear behind it. We need to remember that we can't control anger. If you're going to try to control someone who is angry, if you're going to get in their face and confront their anger, usually it's not going to go well, at least if they're an adult and you're an adult. Maybe it's going to go okay if you're a kid or if they're a kid and you're an adult, but you don't generally confront anger. It's okay for you to say to your spouse, if she struggles with anger, to say, "Can we wait until you're more calm to talk about this?" But to confront anger basically with your anger is not going to help. We got to get to the fear that's behind the anger. Sometimes we think anger is going to solve those issues, those hurts, those feelings. But psychologists actually tell us that the brain slows down when we're angry. We actually get worse at thinking, we get worse at problem solving, we become animals, we become cavemen when we try to solve our anger just by, or solve the emotion just through our own anger. When we're feeling abandoned or vulnerable or belittled because our security has been attacked, responding in anger is not going to help. When we're feeling that we're not important or we're rejected, or we're devalued, or we're told we're not good enough, and we're losing that connection. Responding in anger is not going to solve those things. When we're feeling embarrassed or humiliated or ignored or helpless or powerless or overwhelmed because we've lost control of the kids in COVID-19 and they're still at home and we're working from home, or you've lost control at work because you were passed over yet again for another raise or another promotion, reacting in anger is not going to solve those issues. It's not going to solve those feelings. It's actually going to make it worse. 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love." So we have to drive out fear. We have to be aware of the fear inside of us and figure out why we're getting angry. What's the fear behind it? What's the worry behind it? What's plaguing us? And when we can figure that out, we can do a better job of addressing that anger that comes up. Number 5 truth about anger is disappointment with ourselves can often lead to fear and lead to anger. When we're disappointed with our performance, when we're disappointed that we're not the father we thought we would be, when we're disappointed with how the new job ended up, when we're disappointed that we're not able to afford the house we wanted, or the move didn't work out the way we thought it would, that can really drive fear and lead to a lot of negative emotions and a lot of responses. The last thing about anger I want to mention, just in the list of truths about anger, is that we need to watch for triggers. Triggers like family gatherings, like the holidays, right? Thanksgiving or Christmas, Christmas, 4th of July, whatever those times are that you get together with the family, the in-laws or the sister or brother-in-law that you don't maybe love all that much. And it's important to go into those situations ready and prepared. Another trigger can be January. It's a time of big bills, right? Christmas bills, paying off a lot of Christmas gifts, a lot of traveling time. Another trigger can just be stressful times at work. Maybe it's at the end of the year every year when the budget is due, or if you're a CPA, it's March and early April where it's stressful, and that's a trigger. A big trigger for me was packing to leave for vacation. How about you guys? Can you relate? Do you get stressed when you're packing for vacation? Or when you're trying to pack up stuff from camping on the weekend and it's Sunday and you need to get home and the kids are going crazy. They still want to bike around another 10 times around the loop and you want their help packing up. Or your wife has a zillion other priorities aside from packing up and you get stressed. Those are triggers, right? Those are things we need to become aware. These are vulnerable times for me. I need to be aware of what's going on, and I need to prepare so that I don't get angry. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 5 says, "Love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrong." If we love our spouse, if we love our kids, we are not going to be easily angered. So let's talk about some specific steps to get rid of anger. Obviously, psychologists talk about taking a deep breath and stepping away from the situation. Don't react right then and there. Don't send the email right then and there in the middle of your anger. Don't storm into your boss's office right then and there in the middle of the anger. Allow yourself to cool off. And the key to that is, if we're going to step away, we actually have to turn our thoughts from the anger and into something more helpful. Think better of that person we're angry at, or think of something completely different. Because ultimately, our thoughts drive our emotions. Our thoughts drive our emotions. So what you're thinking about, if you're going to step away and go for a walk or go for a bike ride, don't go for a drive. Way too many people have ended up in car accidents because they were angry and they went for a drive. But we want to think about what we're thinking about in that time that we step away, and make sure we're not just boiling up more anger. We need to be aware of those triggers, the holidays, the packing, the stressful times at work, the naughty kids at Walmart that drive you crazy, right? People following you too close, or whatever your triggers may be, that can help us take care of anger if we're aware of those things, and avoid or prepare for those situations. And then remember that anger is a decision, and how we're thinking about this situation is going to help you be in control of yourself. Also, regarding the deep-seated anger, again, that is so much harder to deal with. Life has gone haywire. You haven't won the million you thought. This move didn't turn out to be everything you thought it would be. That anger can be a sign, can be a gauge, like a gauge on the car, that something is going on, that there's a problem, that there's disappointment, that there's fear and hurt going inside of you. And it's okay to go to a counselor. It's okay to talk calmly with your spouse just about the disappointment that's going on, and maybe that's ending up as anger, the emotion of anger. Ephesians 4:31 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice." It's just what we do as followers of God, no matter where you are, whatever level in your walk with God is, it's what we do. We get rid of those things in our life. Colossians 3:8 says, "You must also rid yourself of all such things as these: anger and rage, malice and slander, filthy language from your lips." It's what we want to purge from our life. We don't want to be known as an angry person. We don't want to destroy our relationships because we are an angry person. We don't want our kids to see us as an angry person. And sometimes it takes medication to help deal with that. Because it's really rooted in depression, or sometimes it takes some counseling, or sometimes it takes some calm conversations with our spouse, or with a parent, or with a brother or sister or a close friend that helps us talk through the disappointments we have in life, or the fears we have in life, and how it's leading to anger when things aren't going the way we thought it would go. I encourage you, just in closing, to talk to your wife or your kids about anger, how it's a natural response, but that it's a choice we make. It'd be a great conversation to have with your kids, a great conversation if you or your wife struggle with anger, to have an open conversation about that, or maybe a friend of yours. And I love to hear your reactions. There's 2 ways you can respond. You can go on our Facebook page, facebook.com/rocksolidmen, or you can email me at rocksolidmentoday@gmail.com. I really value your feedback. I love to hear your thoughts and responses. On Facebook, you can post it right under this episode, or you can message me through Facebook, our Facebook page. Also subscribe, especially if you're on the Apple iTunes podcast app. Any app that allows you to subscribe or comment, it really helps the episodes. It really helps the podcast get some traction and get more well known. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for listening to another episode of Rock Solid Men. Until next time, God bless.